Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this lovely Q&A for the film The Endless Chain. My name is Tai Sergro, and I'm very, very honored and privileged to have the writer and director of the film, Michael Klein, here with us today. Michael, how are you?
Yeah, doing well, thank you. Doing well.
Awesome. So this documentary, The Endless Chain, it explores the world of all boys schools in South Africa with a particular focus on Wynberg Boys High. And with a keen, observant eye and well-placed narration, the film as a whole is a very careful examination of brotherhood, patriarchal systems within these schools, and the concept of masculinity, which is quite relevant in today's times. So with that in mind, I'd like to just jump right in. Michael, what was the original inspiration for this documentary?
I mean, you might not be able to guess this, but it's obviously the school I went to. I grew up for 12 years going to a boys' school. Um, and I think leaving school and in the years after that, I never quite understood my attachment to the school that remained. I think I was never quite sure why I felt like that. I always felt very strongly connected to the school. I'd always want to defend it, even though I wouldn't necessarily like all the aspects of it. And then as that went on, I would even go, well, I don't really necessarily agree with the system, but I still do feel like I've got this attachment that I can't quite shake. And I think the other thing that I was quite interested in is that all boys who go to boys' schools around the country all have a shared experience. And I think very often you can tell if someone went to a boys' school. I can't describe it, but you meet someone and they go, oh, I went to Pretoria Boys, or I went to Rondebosch Boys, or I went to, there is a shared experience. I think he was trying to unpack why this happens, why in this specific schooling environment do we foster this connection that we have, 70-year-olds coming back year after year to relive their school days. What is it about that specific institution that causes that?
I see, definitely. And I think it's quite clear from the film, because when you're speaking about this identity, not really knowing why you're quite attached to the school that you're coming from. And what became clear for me was when you're touching on subject matter and maybe harsh truths that people may not have been all too pleased to talk or hear about in the film. What is quite interesting to find out is, how did you navigate that? Was there a specific methodology that you used when interviewing the participants, and were there any challenges in doing so?
So I think in selecting the people I interviewed, some people, I was looking for quite a wide variety of perspectives, and that's in age. Specifically was kind of what I was targeting. I think speaking to people who are very old and then going down to kind of a lot younger. I think when I was filming, for me, it was hinging around four key events that year, and that was my 10-year reunion. It was the 50-year reunion that was happening that year. It was the grade 8 class of that year being inducted into the system, and it was the valedictory. So those were kind of the four areas that I was looking at, because I think they define steps in this journey of being an old boy at school. And then I was exploring perspectives within those ranges. I think in terms of, I think older people, you're naturally going to get people who are very invested in the system. I think nobody who is critical comes back at their 50-year reunion.
Yeah.
The guys that I spoke to and that in the film share a bit more of a critical view, who are able to more self-analyze the situations and their feelings towards it. They're guys that were in my year, or kind of there at a similar time to me, that I know sort of have kept relationships with and was able to tap into. I think some of the guys just knowing, so the one guy in the middle of the film who kind of says that school was quite difficult for him. That's someone who I approached. I haven't had any contact with him, for the years since I left school, but it was the kind of person who I knew while he was at school, one would feel quite, would want to be part of that system, but who was never allowed to be, and that wasn't any like decision of his. And so I thought that would be quite an interesting perspective to explore. And so trying to find people like that who I think would offer something, outside of the my school's the best kind of perspective.
Yeah, I think it was very, very clear from the film. And for me, one of the more interesting stylistic choices I think that you made was never really identifying who we are hearing in terms of the interviews. We hear what they say, and sometimes it contrasts quite strongly with what we are seeing on screen. And I think that visually shows the conflict of identity, of not really understanding why I'm relating so much to this group of boys, and so on and so forth. So that decision of not identifying the interviewees, was this a conscious decision before filming began, or was it discovered in post-production?
Yeah, it was definitely a choice made later on. So I mean, I filmed all the interviews, expecting we're going to see a little bit here, a little bit there. I kind of chose, I filmed a lot of the interviews in the school museum, so it kind of had this whole feel of all these boys staying in the space. And I think as I cut the film, and specifically as I cut the film down, because it started off being a lot longer, and getting it down into that like 15, 16 minute time frame. It was more interesting, and I think it became, well, for me, what I felt like it was a little bit more universal. I think the film itself doesn't necessarily rely on characters. It's kind of trying to get an idea of an institution.
Yes.
And so I think having, I don't want to say anonymous voices, but certainly non-specific voices. I think it kind of became more representative of a lot of different experiences. I think one of the challenges in picking out who to sort of interview and things like that was, well, there's no global experience. So I think having these different views come in and out, different remembrances of what was happening, I think that for me became quite interesting. And so you didn't necessarily need to see who it was. It's a tapestry almost.
Yes, definitely.
I felt later on it was just a bit, watching it was more interesting, and particularly then when you can see different people playing against the like you said, playing against the visuals. I think that also just shows like how different people perceive an experience at the same time. So I think that kind of was the reason for going that route.
Yeah, I think it was a very effective choice. After all of the filming was done and things edited to get the films edited together and sending it out for feedback and all of that, was your view on your school changed? Was your relationship with your peers, maybe who went to school, altered? Was your perception different after the documentary?
It was a very personal journey experience, I think. So I mean, this film took me a long time to edit. I filmed the bulk of it 2016, 2017. And it's something that I've been working on. So it's been like, okay, when I've got some downtime, chip away at it. And it took a long time, longer than it needed to, but it took a long time, and it's been with me for a while. And it's been something, I've had to think about for a while. And that, as personal experience, has been great. I think I probably went into the film more positive about what I was looking at, and less, I think, still maybe holding some bitterness towards people at school. And on the other, and coming out of it, I think that's almost flipped around, and I feel a lot more critical about the system and what it does and how it does it, and less animosity towards anyone in particular. I think seeing how we all just go through this experience, and being told what being manly is and what is expected of you. I think we're all kind of we take on different aspects of that, but with so much in life, everyone at school is just doing their best. They're still trying to work out who they are. So, but the institution itself, I think it is. I do find it more problematic now. Look, I still look back and go, oh, they had some great memories, and there's good things, but it's always this thing. It's like, if I have a son, do I send him to the school? this is the thing that I know with friends a lot, because I have friends who have subsequently sent their sons to the school, and other schools similar to it, and it's interesting to see what the reason is. I think in showing the film to people, what I find quite interesting is if they went to a boys' school, they said, I can relate 100%. And I've shown it to, I mean, guys, all different provinces. Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. I completely, like, I was at the same kind of school.
Yes.
And for people who weren't at a boys' school, particularly people who are from overseas or, who went to co-ed school, I think sometimes they're quite surprised at kind of what happens. Maybe it's not what they expect.
Yes.
And I like that perspective. I think, so I think it does open your eyes up to maybe different aspects of the schooling system that is held in very high regard, that maybe needs to be addressed. And look, and they are addressing it. I mean, schools in general are addressing it. I think for me, what was always a point that I was interested in, all schools, I think, on paper are very progressive and they all say the right thing. I think what I was trying to show a little bit in this film is that the culture and what actually happens within these institutions isn't always what it says on paper. So schools will always say, all schools will say, look, we value sport, we value academics, we value service, 100%. But when you're at the school, as a boy fitting in, if you are good at culture or good at service, do you feel as that's valued as much as sport? Probably not. Do you feel like, oh, all boys have the same opportunities? Probably not. If you don't fit a certain mold, you don't have the same privileges and rights as boys who do fit a mold. So I think that was sort of something that I was interested in trying to portray somewhat.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us for the Q&A. All the best for your future productions, and we hope to see you at Encounters again.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the talk.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. And if anyone would like to see more of Michael's work, you can check out his website, his production company's website, inclinefilms.co.za.